Welcome to the Digital Nomad Experts podcast by Beach Commute. Today we're going to talk about how much it costs to become a digital nomad. So, Marisa, 20 seconds. Let's answer this podcast and get out of here. How much does it cost to be a digital nomad? Go.
I feel like we got to wait till the end to explain a little bit about this. I know, we should just make this a 20-second podcast episode.
A bonus.
We'll tell you how much it costs, and it's done. The reason we're not telling you that, I guess I'll share that real quick of not saying one number, and we actually will say one number at the end, a little bit of a spoiler alert of kind of a minimum amount that we would at least suggest if you're going to live this lifestyle. But the reason it's not so cut and dry and the reason it's not going to be a 20-second podcast episode is because there's really a variety of amounts you can spend as a nomad depending on a couple factors. One is where you are nomading. So it's very different, not only country by country, but really kind of, I would say continent by continent even, which we'll talk about. It depends how much you are really on the move. That says a lot. Depends on your lifestyle, and it really depends a lot on the activities you want to participate in and, you know, how nice of places you want to stay in, the nice restaurants you want to go to. So we're just going to talk about each of those kind of categories, a little bit of ranges within that, kind of averages, not necessarily exactly what we spend, but just what we sort of see our friends spending, and there's a range of that. And then we will give one number at the end, because I think what a lot of people misassume is you might think about, here's what I spend on 1 week of vacation, and I'm going to multiply that times 4, and that's probably what I'd spend in a month, and then I'll multiply that times 12, and that's what I'd spend in a year. And it's really like, if you're thinking of that for your own lifestyle, it's probably a very different number than you think, and you really can get away with spending a whole lot less than you imagine. So at the end of the day, we want you to realize you can probably already live off of what you're making. You don't have to make, you know, $200,000 to travel the world for a year on end. But anything to add to that, Jeff, of just what we'll go through today and that sort of range, or why we're not just sharing one number to start?
I think that's probably why we've been so reluctant to do this podcast, is because it's really not easy to answer, and a lot of it has to do with a case by case, individual by individual basis. I mean, I traveled with my friend Mark, and he was telling me about this place that he stayed. I think it was in Puerto Escondido. It, like, didn't have a door, and he's like, "Yeah, I got it for $7 a day." And I'm like, "Yeah, of course you did. It didn't have a door, and like, it didn't have AC, and you're dying." He's
What do you
like,
mean
"Yeah, but
it
I
doesn't have a door?
I don't need anything. I just like I get off on getting really good deals." And it's like, all right, so that's the bottom end of the spectrum, right? And then you've got other people that are staying in villas that are really, really expensive. So it is a little tricky for us to figure out how we wanted to do this. So yeah, we're gonna come in the middle, and we're gonna kind of give you like what it could look like. But it's the same answer as, you know, renting an apartment, say in the States or in Western Europe. How much is it going to cost? Well, depends on everything. So we're going to give you our personal experience. We've done this so much, it's going to help narrow down that range. And like you mentioned, we'll give you a number at the end of the podcast.
Yeah. And I want to add to that, like, as you're listening to this episode, really think about the example Jeff just said of, let's say you're living, even in the States, let's say you're living in LA or DC or even in the middle of nowhere. Let's say you're living in Idaho, in Boise, you know. Think about the different range of, maybe even imagine where you live today, and imagine some of your friends or family members. That's like saying, what does it cost to live in Oakland? What does it cost to live in Atlanta? And you might say, you know, these people are paying $1,300 in rent, and these people are sharing a house together 40 minutes outside the city, and they're each paying $700. And these people have a house, and he lives in this house alone that he bought, and he's paying $4,000 a month in a mortgage, right? So even within a city, right, you might be eating out at different places. So the same extrapolates to life as a nomad, which is why why it's really hard to just give one number. But again, we'll talk about what you can do and ways that you will end up spending more, ways you'll end up spending less, and a number at the end that just says, like, all right, based on that, here's sort of a minimum of what we would recommend as a salary of disposable income. So we'll go through some different categories right now. And Jeff, why don't you kick it off with number 1, which is rent. And I think this word is important, rent versus accommodation necessarily, because as a nomad, you're not just spending, you're not just going to a hotel spending $150 a night at a normal rate. So we think about rent because as a nomad, maybe you're living a month or longer in these places. And so you really are thinking about it more like rent that you would live, in your back home life, not just hotel per night. So I'll let you kind of kick it off from here of how much that can cost, maybe the different country examples or continent examples or different lengths of time. What does that look like?
Yeah, so this one, just like everything else we're going to talk about, it's going to have a very, very wide range. And usually the factors that go into that first are where you're going. If you're going to Western Europe, it's going to be very expensive. If you're going to South America, it's going to be relatively a lot cheaper. And it also depends on the neighborhood that you decide to live in. And you'll see this is, I'd say, probably the biggest determining factor. A good example of this is if you were to go and stay in Medellin, Colombia, you can stay in the touristy area. Say you're going to rent an Airbnb, and we'll talk about different ways to rent as well, in a touristy area, and it could run you quite a bit. You can see rent in the 3 figures per day, and then if you go to the less touristy areas, it can be half that. I've gone to places that were very, very nice, and they were 1/3 that. So the range could be very, very different, and a lot of it's going to depend on how tourist impacted that place is that you've chosen to go to. Some places, let me give you a kind of the opposite of that. That was a good example of a tourist impacted place. In Buenos Aires, it was not too expensive, nowhere near Medellin. I think for a very respectable place in the main area where everybody stayed, I paid about $1,200 per month, $1,300 per month. So yeah, that's going to be a huge factor that gets factored in. And another thing that's going to be a big determining factor is how you go about getting the place that you're going to stay in. So you got a few different options. We've done a podcast on this, I believe, the different techniques for rent too. The main way that I see most people doing it is Airbnbs, and you can also do hotels.com, booking.com. There are a lot of individual entire apartments that you can rent on both of those. So it's not just hotels, right? There are also hotels, but I don't know many people other than very, very short stays that are doing that, because it's generally a little less cost effective than if you're using an Airbnb or sometimes VRBO too. Some people use that. And then the length of your stay when you're booking on Airbnb or VRBO can be a big determining factor, because a lot of times if you rent for a week or longer, you get a slight discount, and then you get a fairly steeper discount if you stay for a month or longer, already kind of baked into their scheduling platform. It'll show you this is how much you're saving. And then on top of that, we can negotiate. Oh, I'm always negotiating with hosts. Like, hey, look.
I think that's something a lot of people don't know.
It's kind of a little bit of a hidden hack that people think that the list price is the price.
Just,
you're going to a grocery store. That's what it is. It's really not. And it kind of depends on demand in the area, how quick places are getting taken off and getting rented out. Some places they're not renting out super easily, and you could be like, hey, I'm going to stay for 6 weeks. Do you want to have 0 occupancy for 6 weeks? Here's what I can offer you, and they'll come back to you, and you'll just have like a little mini negotiation. You can work your way into a really nice deal that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think that's good. I think something really important you talked about there is the location you want to stay in each place. In the same way, again, think about the city or place that you live in right now. There's probably neighborhoods that are, whether it's in town or the best neighborhoods or the nicest neighborhoods or closest to the city or walkability or whatever those are. Think about renting in those neighborhoods versus 20 minutes away from those, or the, quote, not quite as nice neighborhoods. Or, back when I lived in New York, it's like everyone to be in Manhattan and in the good neighborhoods versus it was probably half the price and twice the size if you moved far out to Brooklyn. That's just, one specific example. But wherever you are, I think about Playa del Carmen as an example in Mexico, as there's like a set kind of 20 block radius that everyone wants to be. And you can still get something for $2,000 or less for a month. But if you were to go, there's a highway that sort of is this invisible dividing, well, not so invisible, but a dividing line between where a lot of nomads and tourists stay versus a lot of locals. And if you want to go 3 blocks right on the other side of that highway, and it's still just as walkable, but you have a highway to cross, you could probably spend half that much. So again, it's a huge difference. So again, think about, in Bali, for example, to stay in a place that has, a pool and a beautiful villa, nicely decorated in the main heart of where you want to be now, it probably costs $1,600 to $2,000 a month. If you're staying by yourself, if you get a house with 3 or 4 friends, it's going to be less. But if you were to go 15 minutes farther away, you could probably get an epic place for half that price. So again, just think about the location. Really, this is why there's not a straight answer, right? It really depends on your quality. And I love the example you said of Mark, where he's like, I got it for $7 a day and it didn't have a door.
He was so proud. He was so happy with himself.
Yes, we have a lot of people who love just like finding those deals or those hacks. Yeah. Or some people just really don't, like, to me, where I like to work from home a lot. So where I stay really impacts my mood. Like, I want bright light. I want to feel good in that place because I spend a lot of time there when I live there. But other people love to like be gone all day, work from cafes. Where you live, like, does not matter. If you're someone like that, you could probably spend $15 a day just having a bed to crash on in a room or wherever. If that doesn't bother you, like, you could do this really cheaply. But again, it really all depends on your style. Do you want a door? Do you want air conditioning? Do you want a nice desk or table to work from? Do you want bright lights and a pool? Like, what are you looking for? So anyway, with that, and then Jeff said as well, like, Southeast Asia is probably going to be your best bet to have, the least cost of living in terms of the quality that you will get for the price that you pay. And then there's some countries in South America that, maybe rival that as well, that are similar. Weirdly, Central America is probably not as inexpensive as you think it is. Sometimes it can be kind of US similar pricing. You probably get a little bit more for a more bang for your buck, but countries like Costa Rica and Panama, or it just depends. They're not as inexpensive as you might think. And then Europe, depending, there's countries in Eastern Europe that actually you can rival Southeast Asia as well. I would say in Eastern, Eastern, like Bulgaria, Romania. Actually, Romania Eastern got a little bit expensive, but like Bulgaria.
Again, it depends on where in Romania. Cluj was particularly expensive.
So the cities, the locations, it makes a difference. But yeah, generally Eastern Europe, Albania, those sort of places, or Serbia, you can get less expensive compared to your Germany, France, the Netherlands is going to be super expensive. But also, again, if you were in the Netherlands, like if you're in prime places in Amsterdam, it's going to be off the charts expensive. But if you were 30 minutes outside the city, you can find something. So again, it all depends, but just know kind of Western Europe and, Central North America are going to be more expensive. Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, and South America are generally going to be less expensive. And then you've got Africa, which is really like all over the place depending where you are. Sometimes places are really affordable and less expensive. And sometimes they're oddly like a lot more expensive than you'd think they'd be. Like, I actually found they were on the more expensive side in some locations I went to. So it really just depends, and depends the kind of accommodations you're looking for. But that's just a general sort of, and Australia is going to be expensive. New Zealand's going to be kind of up there, but that's just general. Just wanted to kind of share general pricing there. So yeah, and then rent, like, I think the negotiation part you talked about is super important. The longer you stay, even on Airbnb, I think basically, if you choose 4 months, it's basically 4 weeks. It's basically 1 month is the same price as like 3 weeks automatically, something around there, but you can always negotiate. So I would say, I don't know, do you want to share? We shared a couple of numbers of rent, but people are paying, like, again, there's places you can spend $1,000 or less on rent in some different countries, some different neighborhoods, some different places. I would say, like, on average, I feel like our friends spend anywhere, I would say, $1,500 to $2,000 a month. If I had to give like an average range of all of our Nomad friends, of all different salaries, of all different places, around there. So you can spend more if you're in, if you're going to Japan for the month, you might spend closer to $3,000 for the month. If you're in Cambodia, living somewhere random, maybe you're going to spend $800 a month. But I would say on average, expect to pay, for just a pretty decent place, nothing crazy, but like nice, you're going to pay, call it between $1,500 to $2,000 ish around the world. Is that fair? I don't know. Is that a fair?
I think it probably falls in that ballpark. We've also got friends that exclusively share places with other people for saving money, and you can save quite a bit of money by sharing with other people for sure. Like, you can take your $1,500 and then that turns into $750 if you're sharing with
That's
another
a good
person.
Point.
So also,
do you mean sharing
again,
a room or sharing an apartment or home?
Sharing an apartment. And then, there's been people that'll share rooms. Wi-Fi tribe people will do that. They'll share rooms. They don't really, I snore, so I can't share a room with anybody. So yeah, it kind of depends on your comfort level. But yeah, I think you're right. Around $1,500 to $2,000 to get a few more examples out there. I mentioned the place that I stay in Laurelis is a little bit off the beaten path. It's coming up a little bit, but it gives me about $1,000 to $1,100 per month. Whereas you could double that in Poblado, the popular areas. Argentina, Buenos Aires, I think it was $1,200, $1,300 for a 1-bedroom apartment. Antigua, again, I'm glad you mentioned this. Central America is just sneakily climbing up in prices. Yeah. This 1-bedroom costs, I think, $1,700, $1,800, and you were just there
in
2 years prior in Antigua.
Wow, yeah, that's like twice what we.
You guys were, a few people were bragging about like $700, $800.
Yeah,
and it was. Yeah, it shot up pretty quick. It's just Central America. And then Costa Rica, forget about it. I don't even know at this point.
It's a lot.
A lot.
Yeah.
It's not a good starter location for people that are just looking to kind of not break their bank. Yeah, if you're a little bit more price sensitive, it's probably not my first recommendation because it's kind of shooting up through the roof. And then, Eastern Europe, I'd say probably near the same exact price range as South America. I think we're in the neighborhood of about $1,500 or so.
Beautiful. And again, all ranges depending on how central you want to stay, how nice the place is, all of that. But yeah, I think overall, just remember when you're looking for a month, it's less expensive than if you are just thinking about a nightly hotel rate that you would find for a vacation in a nice hotel. It really is a very different price than that. So hopefully that gives you a range. So that's the first category. Hopefully that starts to get the ball rolling, starts to give you some things to say like, okay, actually maybe that's sort of similar to what you would pay in the US or elsewhere in your just daily life in whatever country you live in. Maybe it's a little more, maybe it's a little less, but yeah, just think about that as a ballpark. So the second thing to add to that, which is why I think the second category is another reason why people think living as a nomad is going to be so much more expensive than your normal life at home, are the flights, right? So if you are moving around every single month, a lot of people will think, that's like taking a big vacation every single month. Like you're thinking about your round trip flights that maybe you would spend on your week-long vacation and extrapolating that to like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be spending this every month on flights. That's going to add another $1,000, $1,200, $1,500 every month to my budget. But it's really not the case. So like rent, this will depend on your lifestyle. So if you are someone who's like, I want to go to Europe to live in one country for January, and then for February, I'm going to fly to South America, and then for March, I think I want to go to South Africa, and then April, I'm going to fly to Bali. If you are continent hopping all the time, every month, your flights will add up. Remember though, they're also not round trip. So think about this as about half what you would normally pay. So if you're just kind of going from place to place, it's very different than flying there and back. It usually is about half the cost. So if I'm flying from the US on a big trip to Bali, I'm going to pay for that round trip ticket, but maybe eventually you'll get home. But otherwise, I'm going to find a one-way flight to Bali, and then I'm going to hop around Asia for a while, ideally. So it's about half that. Also, a lot of times, if you think about the flights that you're booking, it's probably around a certain vacation time, like maybe a holiday. It's probably going to be either a Saturday or Sunday flight because you want to travel on the weekends when you're not working, so you don't have to, take days off for your flight and travel time. And it's probably just most people, it's around a specific time or event or a family wedding that you have to get to or something, and the flights are a lot more expensive. So just as an example, I'm in Atlanta right now. I am flying to Mexico next month for a friend's wedding. I'm actually going for a certain window of time, and I had to be there like on a certain day by a certain, to get there for a dinner that night. And looking at the flights of like when I wanted to fit in for that specific time and window and occasion, the flight was like $625, which it's never that much. I was like, what's going on? I've never paid this much for a flight from Atlanta to Cancun. And then I was looking and browsing. I was like, oh, if I wanted to get there that night, it was going to be $200 cheaper and I'd miss the dinner. If I wanted to go 3 days later or 3 days earlier, or fly on a Tuesday and Wednesday instead of a Friday to Monday, it was also like $400 cheaper. So think about this with nomad life is you're not confined typically to certain holidays, days, travels, and you have a lot of flexibility. So you can say, oh, I thought I was going to leave this country on a Saturday, but actually if I leave on Tuesday night after my work hours or Tuesday morning, depending on the time change, it's a third of the price. And I'm actually happy to go on Tuesday morning instead of Saturday night. And it doesn't affect my work hours because I'm still there by the time I'm supposed to start working, making that up. So anyway, flights are a lot less than you'd think. And then also once you're, again, like let's say you get over to Southeast Asia, the flights from, typically the Air Asia and some other smaller airlines, you can get for like $100 from country to country, or sometimes less, to call it $100-ish. If you're traveling around Europe, there are really inexpensive trains that you can take from place to place. So there are buses you can take from country to country. So it really depends where you are, how you're traveling, but it's a lot less money on flights than you would imagine if you think about it differently than just extrapolating what you're currently paying for vacation flights versus nomad life.
I think that's a good point with the timing. A lot of times I will book my trip based on two things, convenience and cost of the flight. So like it won't just be, hey, I've got these weeks available because I'm working for a company and I've got vacation time and I have to do it. Generally falling on a Saturday, which has got to be the worst day to book a flight. It'll be like, all right, I'm going to scan these flights for a while. I'm going to see what trends are popping up. By the way, check out episode 121, 11 ways to find cheap flights as digital nomads for more information on this. And we talk about in that episode, scan the flights, keep an eye on them, look at certain trends, try to figure out which days of the week are going to be cheaper, because it could cut your costs in half if you decide to book on a Tuesday or something. And you're going to be potentially in the complete off season of tourist travel, right? So yeah, a lot of times I will think in terms of, all right, my trip's going to be booked at this time because the flights are half as much. And because you got so much freedom as a digital nomad, you can do that. Tuesday's fine. Tuesday's not fine when you have to accommodate your 2 weeks of vacation around that. So that's a really good point. I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, and even just having time, there's two other things with that. And yeah, definitely if you're interested in the flight part of this, go back to the episode Jeff just mentioned, because we went in a lot of detail about so many different flight saving methods, but just kind of talking about the different freedom and lifestyle of it. You also might see a place where it would have like a day layover in a city, or you could spend 3 days flying through somewhere that, again, if you're just on vacation, you're just trying to get to that place as fast as possible, spend as much time in the place you want to go. But sometimes there's like a day layover in, I don't know, a new country you've never been to. And it's like, okay, I'll just go work from there for the day. Like, why not? And then I'll eat dinner in Paris and just like go back, and then keep going on my way to Asia or wherever. So I don't know, it's kind of fun. You can spend more time that way. And then also, as Jeff said, like you just kind of mentioned scanning flights and going places accordingly. There's times where I've gone to countries for a month just because, like, from where I was, there was a cool, like, it was the best, not like the best flight deal available. I wouldn't go somewhere if I just didn't want to go there. But I remember when I was in Mauritius, I really wanted to go to Mozambique, and the flights were just, they didn't make sense. The timing wise, how long it took there, they were just weirdly expensive. And it was like a third of the price to fly to Namibia. And I just went to Namibia for a month, and it was like the best month ever. So anyway, like, you also might just be like, I hadn't considered going here, but there's a good flight deal. Why not? So I don't know. It's very different than nomad life. But Jeff, what would you say? This is a hard question. I don't even think annually is a good way to say this, but how would you think about, like, if you were to assign a budget of flights, whether it's per month, per year, per week, like, what would you say of, like, on average, what are people spending? And while you're thinking about that, also a reminder that there's a lot of different ways, like, just like rent, you can get a nice place or not. You can book first class or not. You can book like non-refundable flights or changeable flights. You can book a 5 a.m. flight for a lot less, or you might really value your sleep and be like, you know what? I don't want to wake up at 2 a.m. and find a taxi. Like, I want to go at a decent hour and pay more. So again, there's ways you can fly a lot cheaper. So there's a range. But Jeff, again, just kind of like, I don't even know how to put a number to this. What would you say on average people are spending?
Just ballpark it, I'd say somewhere in the middle would probably be around like $5,000 a year. And that's doing a good deal of traveling, I'd say. That's probably on the safe side. I mean, that's assuming $500, roughly $500 per month. And those are significant flights. And that's assuming 12 months a year travel. So yeah, I mean, that would be safe. If you're like, I need a budget for just flights, I think you'd be pretty safe and you'd be able to cover a lot of ground with that much money.
Yeah, I love that.
That's probably on the high end.
Yeah, I would say that is on the high end with a lot of movement. So again, think about that as sort of a max. And if you're like, you know what, maybe if you don't have as big of a budget and you just want to go spend the year traveling around Europe or travel around Asia, you're going to spend so much less than that. So yeah, think about, I like that number, 5,000 if you want to be moving around, really kind of flying to a different country every month, kind of bopping around the world a bit more. Yeah, that's a decent number.
Okay, cool. So let's go to the next category. And this one is purely discretionary. It's eating out. And this one, maybe more than anything, will give you the full spectrum of travelers and their tastes, right? Because you've got some people that I know who exclusively eat out. Never seen them lift a dish in the house. They don't even know what a pan is. They don't know. They can live in a place for a month and not even know where the stove is. And it's just going to be 3 meals a day, 4 meals a day, delivered or going to restaurants. And then other people like me, I like to cook quite a bit, and I'll go to the grocery store and I'll cook, 5 meals a week at least. So the range of this one completely depends on, if I could make a recommendation, I would say go shopping. Have some good food at the house, especially if you're a new digital nomad. It's shocking how fast you can burn through your budget and how unhealthy you can get in a short amount of time by not cooking your own food. So I would say just by default, maybe keep it to, I'd love to hear what you have to say, but I'd say keep it to eating out maybe 3 to 4 times per week or so, something in that neighborhood, like a proper meal out. Just to start, because your health is going to thank you, your budget's going to thank you, and it's just, it's nice to have healthy food at home. Let me kick to you. I'd like to get your thoughts on like what a good recommendation for a new digital nomad would be.
Yeah, I would say if you can, think about, as a general global rule, and I'm going to give a couple of different country examples of when you might do this differently, but imagine how you live your lifestyle at home currently. And just say whatever your budget is for that now, it's probably can be about that exact same thing or less when you live as a nomad. And so if you already have a high budget and you want to order in or eat out every single meal, and that's a big part of your monthly budget at home, just kind of say, okay, that's about what it's going to cost as well. So if you're cooking some and eating out some, it'll probably be about the same. So what I don't want you to do is the same as when we thought about hotel or flight prices that you would extrapolate for your normal vacation. So imagine you go for a week and you're like ordering room service for breakfast, and then you're heading out and eating every single meal out at like the nicest place you can find because you're a foodie and you're in this new country once and you just want to every day experience the best of the best, like Michelin star restaurant. Like, it's not going to be the same as a nomad, probably, right? Unless you have the budget and just love that so much and want to, then by all means go for it. But imagine what you spend at home is going to be about what you do while you're living as a nomad. But as you said, Jeff, it's going to be really important for you to I think it takes more intention to do so at first, because you have to go and figure out, where are the grocery stores? Like, where is the even if you think about at home, like different grocery stores have different prices and different quality food. So it takes a minute to find those best markets, stores, where you want to get your fruit, where you want to get vegetables, where you want to get your meat, and just your general staples, all of that. And then also when you first get somewhere, it takes a minute to find, you probably know, if you think about, even if you're ordering in at home or you're going out, you probably know where you can get good food, but at a great price as well. So, right, it's not the most expensive, but you're I know these places where it's a good bang for my buck. It's more than I'd be spending at home, but it's also good food, versus you can spend a lot of money for bad food and be really disappointed. So it takes a minute to find those restaurants and those places in the neighborhoods that you go to. So I like to think about that first week of you really have to be intentional and get on the ground, walk around, look on Google Maps, look at reviews, find the restaurants, get recommendations, ask your local Airbnb host, ask other people where they're eating, and find the places. But it can be much more affordable than you think. The other caveat I wanted to give is sometimes it can be a lot less expensive to eat really well. So in locations, I would say Bali and pretty much anywhere in Thailand are really the two that come to mind for me. It's more expensive and worse to cook yourself than almost anything you will find either ordering in every single meal or eating out.
Anywhere. That's wild.
It's wild because the place, like, just food is so inexpensive there in general, and you're getting great quality, often, if you find the right places, but you get good ingredients, like great chef prepared food, whereas the grocery stores aren't that great. And so if you try to buy things for yourself and make your own meal, it's like, well, this is terrible and I paid more anyway. So it weirdly is in a couple those are unique circumstances, but it's why a lot of people love Bali and love Thailand, because you save yourself so much time. You order in every single meal or go to a cafe and eat out almost every single meal. It doesn't break your bank. You're getting better quality food. You're eating healthy, and it saves you so much time that you can then allocate to work or sleep or work out or whatever. So anyway, just some weird things to think about if that's important to you, but there's a whole range. But I would say as like our average takeaway is whatever you spend at home, imagine you'll pay that or less.
I think it's fair, and it's just generally, like we talk about, most of the digital nomad locations we go there because the cost of living is relatively lower. So you're kind of mentally already scaling up for eating out a little bit more because you're active. You want to be doing stuff. You want to be exploring. So that does, I think, account for that gap there for sure. And then just to give you some idea of the ranges that you could be thinking about for, like, just imagine you're going out to have just a basic 3-course meal at a restaurant. A good example that I just had, Buenos Aires, was on the particularly cheap end. I mean, you'd be able to go out and get, they've got all kinds of problems with their currency right now, but just in general, you'd be able to go out and get like a steak dinner or a pasta or something coming in around $10 or so. So you're looking at like 1/3 to 1/4 the price in North America. And then on the other end of the spectrum, anywhere in Italy or Western Europe, you're looking at about, I don't know, maybe the same as the States. Probably looking at $25 plus per dinner, maybe up to $40 per dinner. And then you've got your extreme end in Asia. It's got to be the cheapest. It's got to be the cheapest around, right? Yeah, completely depends on where you are and how often you're eating out and how fancy you get. Again, just like everything else, we've seen people that pride themselves on finding the best value deals all around, including restaurants, cooking from themselves, and then other people that I know, every single meal, I'm not cooking, not lifting a finger. I want it ready, good to go, and that becomes a higher expense than their flights. So, yeah, I think that pretty well covers that bullet point.
Perfect. So the next one on our list is a gym. Maybe you're a gym person, maybe you're not, but this was important. I know for me and you and Diego, like, the gym is an important part of our lives, and I think a lot of our nomad friends as well. And this really has a range depending on two things: what country you're in, and also what type of gym you want to go to. So as an example, I remember, I think I paid $30 per month for a gym in Guatemala. It was pretty bare bones. I kind of like those hole-in-the-wall gyms, but again, it wasn't, I don't know. It's like a personal preference, but you can pay that. But then if I think about in Mexico, just as an example, in Playa del Carmen, there's a gym. I don't know what people pay per month. I don't know. Let's make it up. Let's say it's like $60 a month or so for a pretty nice gym that, it's a monthly expense. It's like the higher end. People go there and they're looking cute and have their scene and, it has spin classes and all of that. And then there's a boxing gym that I am obsessed with there that is $20 for the month. You can go as much as you want. So those are some ranges. And then even pop over to somewhere like Bali. There's probably gyms you can go to for $34 a month, $30 or $40 a month-ish that are those kind of more bare bones. It's got your equipment. There's probably not air conditioning. You just go in, or maybe some do, but you just go in and it's got your machinery. And then there's gyms in Bali that are $150 per month that have like personal trainers and every class you can imagine, and the influencers are there because it looks pretty. So again, there's a range of everything, but like, again, I think it's kind of funny as we're starting to point all these out, it really depends on your personality and what do you prioritize gym or living space or Michelin restaurants, or, usually people have their thing. So I don't know. Those are some ranges of gyms that I have found and gone to. Sometimes I find just cool classes I want to attend, or, people just run or walk outside, or, just do at-home workouts. So there's a whole range, but I don't know. What would you say or add to that as that average price?
That's the right range, I would say. And then for those people who want to go on the more frugal end of things, like you said, there's a lot of free stuff to do. Even on Airbnb experiences, you can find like running groups, you can find free yoga in parks, you can find all kinds of stuff. Running trails. Generally, I'll just go to a place and there's a few websites where you can find good running trails, and I'll just go do that. A lot of people do yoga at home, that kind of thing. So again, yeah, like everything else, it is the range, but you're not going to get super, super expensive. Like you said, the most expensive one, it's like a club, it's like you could get up to $150, but it's all the stuff. It's all the things.
Yes.
And you don't necessarily need all that stuff unless that's the lifestyle you're used to living. So
so it seems like for this one, the price, if you're writing a list and adding up your expenses here,
30 to 60,
anywhere from $0 to kind of $30, $40, $50 to $150, depending on you're looking for in a gym. Before we go on to the last one, I would say as a rule, almost everywhere that I travel, let me know if you agree with this, almost everywhere that I think nomads travel, you're almost never renting a car. You almost don't need a car. Most of us choose nomad locations because they're easy to get around, they're walkable, or there's really easy taxis if you really needed to get anywhere, Ubers. Sometimes you'll be in some countries where you want to rent a scooter, kind of moped type thing for the month. And that could be anywhere, depending on the country, from $50 to $100 for that month, I would say. Maybe it could be a little more, a little less, depending where you are. If that's in those places, for me, the places where I've rented scooters are Thailand and Bali. I know for you, I think in Puerto Escondido, did you do that in Mexico? Yeah, so some places, other places, people will rent a bike for a month or even buy a bike and sell it back on a marketplace. But I almost just don't add this into any category when I think about a budget for a month, because most of the places you're going to travel as a nomad are kind of walkable or Uberable, if that's a word now. But anything you want to add to that one?
Yeah, if you do end up we've rented a car in certain instances, usually for some sort of weekend excursion.
Yes.
Some people, oddly enough, that guy, Mark, who didn't want to pay for a door, wanted to rent a car for the month in Costa Rica. I don't know where the priority. I'll have to talk with him.
Just different priorities. Again,
there's a lot to unpack going on there.
He's prioritizing driving around everywhere and not sleeping at home.
Yeah, exactly. And that in Costa Rica ran, I think, $500 for the month. The scooter that I got in Puerto Escondido, that was Santa Teresa. Puerto Escondido was a scooter. I got that for about $200 for the month.
Okay.
I think you could I think that's probably a safe range, $200 to $300, something like that for a scooter. But for the most part, I think that's the only time I've actually had a vehicle just for getting around, as opposed to going on trips or something. So that's a good point. We do usually choose places that are easy to get around, either Uber, taxi, or for the most part, walkable. I'd say most of the places, maybe 80% of the places, aside from Bolivia, which is the least walkable country I've ever been to. We'd still be walking to town.
Well, we weren't living in the heart of La Paz.
We'd still be walking to town from Diego's place. If you live in La Paz, but we'll leave it at that.
I would say the two countries I have rented a car for the month, and it was shared among friends, and it was actually on Wi-Fi Tribe chapters where we were going to some pretty remote-ish places. Mauritius was one of them, which is the least walkable island I've ever been on. And Oman in the Middle East there, we also had a car because it's so fucking hot there that everyone just it's too hot to walk, so everyone it's just not a walkable it's not a walkable city at all. So I think there was probably 20 of us in each of those places, and we got 4 or 5 cars that we sort of shared among us for the month, and that was really helpful to drive to the grocery store, to pick up, run errands, go out to dinner, stuff like that. But as Jeff said, mostly we're just renting car. Like renting a car for the weekend to go on an excursion, and you might pay a couple $100s for that, but maybe it's shared between people, or sometimes you can also take buses places or go on shared tours. So anyway, something to think about as well. And I think that actually kind of goes and flows nicely into our last category here before we share our overall number. But that's kind of what we're calling general entertainment, general travel experiences. I would call it like general entertainment and experiences, but I'm gonna throw this one for you to start to describe, Jeff. What do you think about this category?
This is an important one because for me, it's a really big part of why I do digital nomad life, is being able to experience the location, and that includes a lot of stuff. It can include from a range of free walking tours on a weekend to going to, we've got an episode on otherworldly locations. So really cool spots that are nearby where you're staying, which could involve a small flight. It could involve renting a car, that kind of thing. It could be just an afternoon going to some paid garden or something like that. But having enough money to be able to say yes to some of these local experiences, I think is important, because this is a lot of the stuff that you bring back with you. These are a lot of the memories that you have. It's not sitting in the apartment getting your work done in your normal working hours. It's, what did I do afterwards? What did I do during the weekends? Was I able to go to some of these once in a lifetime memorable types of things? And I'd like to add to that, it doesn't necessarily need to be very expensive stuff. And a lot of my favorite things that I've gone on were not particularly expensive. You can find a lot of these, and we should talk a little bit about how you go about finding some of these experiences in locations that we go to. A lot of them are word of mouth. Friends have told us, hey, I've gone to XYZ place in this location. You should go check it out. Some are very well known. When we went to Bolivia, you have to go to the Salt Flats. That's just a thing. You go to the Salt Flats. It's a well-known destination that you have to hit. You can go on Airbnb experiences. That's a good source for finding, what's available in the area. What are a lot of people doing? What am I missing? I don't trust the internet so much. Google search. We've talked about that for various reasons before. What else have you got? Do you have any examples of?
Yeah, I would say just to think about this one as a range as well, that people who are on more of a budget or maybe don't have as much disposable or discretionary income might opt out of some of the more expensive experiences, but there's still so much that you can do. So just, I don't know why we were talking about this example before, it keeps coming to my mind, but one of like the more expensive experiences that just seems to come up if you want to do around the world is like a hot air balloon ride, for example. So there's some places in Myanmar and in Cappadocia, Turkey. Those are two places that are like world known that I've done. And they're usually like, I don't know, they can be anywhere from $200 to $500 per person for these experiences, right? So for some people, like I know who've gone, they're just like, you know what, that just wasn't in my budget. I'm going to sit and watch the hot air balloons go up in the morning. And that's free and totally magical. It's different than riding on it, right? So that's like just an example of, you don't have to do every single thing. And there's also different price points in which you can do that. Another example, when you talk about the Salt Flats in Bolivia, we flew there from our home, me and you, and maybe I think like a lot of us, a flight. And we had a friend or two who just had less of a budget who took a bus there overnight and met us there. So there's ways to have these experiences. So it's like,
we bus there and flew back.
Oh, we flew back. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Okay.
Yeah.
We did bus there. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. We did bus there. And then we decided to fly home because we wanted to be back on Sunday and go to sleep at a good hour to wake up on Monday and be productive. And other people bus back. You're right. So again, even with that, like there's different ways, even within the experiences that you're doing, to pay different amounts. So I know, as another example, a lot of people, when they think about going on a safari, for example, in Africa and different countries, if you think about going from the US, I don't know why people have it in mind. It's like, it's $10,000 just to go on a safari and nothing less. But when you're in Namibia, you can rent your own car, drive to the park, drive yourself around. You're paying for the rental car, maybe split it between a couple of people, and it's not as much as you'd think it would be elsewhere. So I would say actually, even just, I don't know why this example came to my mind as well. People talk about going to Antarctica and spending a ton of money to get down there on a boat. if you're a nomad, people say you can literally just show up at that same place if you're flexible and have time where it doesn't matter exactly what day you go. And maybe you just live in that town. And when there's openings, those boats aren't always filled. You can go on that same boat and have the same experience for half the price. Yeah, for 50% off. So there's a lot of things like that. So again, these are just examples where if you think about the activities that you're doing as a traveler, or like as a vacationer, you're probably looking online ahead of time and seeing these like rates that are 3 times as much as if you're just on the ground in that country and you ask around. Someone's like, oh yeah, I got a friend who will take you on a boat to this island for $20. If you look online, it's like $150 for this experience for the day. And it doesn't have to be that much. So anyway, those are just some examples all to say when you're on the ground and living in a place, you can either do things a different way that are less expensive, find less expensive options for the exact same experiences that other people are paying more for, or just choose your own. As Jeff said, there's so many awesome free experiences, walking tours, or just like classes, Airbnb experiences, local people you meet that are going to be so much more memorable than just paying $1,000 for like something. And then also when you're splitting these experiences among friends, like if you meet other travelers and you're like, hey, you want to rent a car and go together? Or do you want to share this cool Airbnb in this like mountain town in the middle of nowhere with some friends? You can also lower expenses there. So it really is very flexible. And again, if I think about living in Argentina, there was people who were like going to tango shows and this and that and the other, and other people who are like, you know what, I'm going to walk by and just see this free thing on the street. And like, that's cool too. So there's a whole range of things. And I don't know do you have a ballpark number? This one's so hard because it's such a range of what you want to spend on. I don't even know how to give this one a number.
Geez, I would probably just budget couple $100 a month at the most.
Yeah.
I probably don't go through that. Well, I mean, we've covered eating out, which is a big part of it. So this is just kind of like the excursion thing. If you saved $200 a month, you'd be able to do a lot of good stuff.
Yeah. Do you count that as like weekend trips too?
Yeah.
Or are you thinking, okay.
I think so. Yeah. And you're not going to go on weekend trips every weekend. Well, maybe when you first start as a
digital
nomad.
If you first get started.
You might. I won't anymore. I don't have the energy.
But I used to.
Yeah. I mean, if you saved $50 per weekend and did every weekend, on average, you'd see a lot of stuff. I think you'd be more than safe with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, take it with a grain of salt. And it depends on what you do. I was just remembering when we were in Bolivia, like one of the weekends we rented ATVs. I don't remember what it cost. Probably not that much per person, but then we camped, for the weekend, and we went. It was like one of the most epic experiences we'll remember, and that didn't cost very, So it's like there's a whole range of things. So with that,
drum roll.
As we think about drum roll, overall price of like what should you be making to at least live comfortably-ish as a digital nomad, to think that you could travel the world for a year on end if you wanted to as a digital nomad. So we would say if you are taking home about $30,000 or more, you can live as a digital nomad. This number might surprise you. It might sound really low. If you are doing this, the reason we say this is we have an episode, I don't know, Jeff, if you know the number, maybe you want to look it up while I talk, an episode where we did of locations that you could live for under $2,000 per month. And that was all in on accommodations and, eating and gym and all of that. And again, if you want to live for the $7 a month and no door, you could probably travel the world for $12,000, But we would say $30,000 is a safe number. You're going to have to be money conscious. You're going to have to say no to some experiences. You're going to have to maybe not stay in the nicest of places. You might want to travel in Asia and South America and Eastern Europe and not go to some other places that you might be excited about, but you can do it. And so as I say this, I remember actually talking to my dad once. If you're listening, he listens to some of our episodes sometimes, but I remember he was like, well, why wouldn't you just want to save your money and then like go on a vacation where you can just spend and have a nice experience? I was like, because then I'd be missing out on all of these other places. And so I want to share that if you're thinking about traveling and maybe you're not making $100,000 or more, you can absolutely still live this lifestyle and still have incredible experiences in so many different countries, maybe even live better honestly, than you are. Like, you might have a nicer apartment and a better, a better lifestyle, a better, more enjoyable lifestyle. You might be eating better food than the country or city than you're currently in even. And maybe you don't travel around as much. Maybe you stay a little longer in one location, or you're taking the overnight buses instead of the flights places, but you can do it. And then as you make more, have more and more money, you just kind of up your lifestyle, or, eat at the nicer restaurants, have better timed flights. Maybe you'll stay at a little bit nicer place with a door. That's still so funny to me. But anyway, the point is you can do it. And I think a lot of people don't believe that. I think maybe you're hearing this number. I don't know. Let us know if that number surprises you. But a lot of people, I think you have to make $100,000 or more. And even then it's still going to be tight, but you really can live as a nomad for less. And you're probably going to have to either rent your place out or let it go at home in order to do that, right? You're not going to want to be paying rent and spending all that other stuff. But that's my overall number. Anything to add to that, Jeff?
Yeah, and just as a clarification, that's $30,000 out of your pocket. That's not your annual, that's your take home, right? So that's after taxes and all that kind of stuff. So you'd have to be making more than that annually. But yeah, I can point to 3, 4, or 5 people off the top of my head who are making around that range and enjoy a lot of the same experiences that I do. Do it a little different. Like they'll all always share apartments with people, skip some of the dinners here and there, but still just like living this lifestyle to its fullest. So yeah, this is not like an exclusive elite club of people that are making lots and lots of money.
Yeah.
You can get by on a wide range. And yeah, if you want to put a number on it, say $30,000 to start, and you're going to be doing amazing for budgeting.
Yeah. You're living on you're budgeting yourself. You're watching your money, but you can do it at that number.
That's good. Oh, and that episode, this was top locations to live for under $2,000 per month. 9 locations to live as a digital nomad for under $2,000 per month. That's episode 126.
Beautiful. Yeah, that was a fun one. So if you're curious, like, all right, you're like, this is me, this is my budget.
Updated for 2024. Yeah.
Yeah. So check it out and see, like, what countries could you do that in? What would appeal to you? Okay, so with that, if you're now excited, you're realizing you can afford to live this lifestyle, which you absolutely can. If you don't yet have the remote job to get you there, maybe you're wondering what kind of jobs are people doing, check out beachcommute.com/91 to see a list of 91 different jobs that digital nomads in our community are actually doing while they travel. It's a really interesting one. And if you just want to get on our email list to get information about podcasts, other remote jobs, different things we're offering, updates, just go to beachcommute.com/email to hop on our email list. And other than that, if you loved this episode, if you found it helpful, always feel free to give us the stars, the 5 stars, the thumbs up, the subscribe, whatever it is on the platform you're listening to. It really does help the podcast grow, and it's really been super meaningful to us. And Jeff, any last words before we hop off?
Nope, that's it. If you have any questions, write us in at hello@beachcommute.com. We've been to a lot of places. We can probably give you some idea of how much it'll cost for various things if we've been there. If not, I'm sure we can probably find out. So write us in at hello@beachcommute.com, and we will see you again next week.